I'm Kelly from UnderATexasSky.com, and I'm here with another wreath tutorial. We've done several wreaths over the past several weeks. The poly deco mesh are the ones we've done most. We've done the poof technique, we've done a ruffle technique, and we've done a combination of those two techniques and have made some really wonderful things. I've gotten fantastic feedback from people. I love it so much when I get comments on our videos that tell me that you're trying these things and that they're turning out great. That really makes me feel so good that you are actually out there trying what I'm trying to teach you. And you know, I've gotten some comments that the videos may be a little bit long. I do tend to spend a little bit of time on things because I want it to be really clear and not take for granted that you automatically know how to do something just because I happen to know how to do it. So I really appreciate you sticking with me and enjoying the videos. Today we're going to do another burlap type wreath. We've done the poof technique on a grapevine wreath and it turned out really cute. Today we're going to do a technique that's called the burlap petal or the petal bubble. I've seen it a few different ways out there. I've made a couple of wreaths with this, so I'm really kind of new at doing it too, so it's good for y'all to see the process when you're not an expert on what you're doing, but you know it well enough to be able to share it so somebody else may be able to perfect it. The materials that we're going to need for this particular wreath is this time, instead of a work wreath with the twist ties, this is just a foam wreath that you get in the floral department at the craft store. The wreath that I'm using is a 16-inch foam wreath, and these are really inexpensive, so everybody should be able to get one of those. I'm going to be using a burlap, and normally we would be using a rolled burlap, which is super simple to use. The only thing I don't like about the rolled burlap is that, like in this for instance, it's a very loose weave and it really will unravel on you. And I've done a couple of these wreaths and the petals that I've done tend to unravel. So I thought I would try something a little bit different. So I went to the fabric department, and you know, you can buy burlap by the yard in the fabric department. And the neat thing about the burlap that you can get in the fabric department, now you can get these rolls of burlap. Now this one I believe is 5.5 inches. It's much like this one. I think actually I got these at Walmart. They were $1 a piece or something, and I just bought a ton of them. They're great for bows and things like that, but they could also work great for this particular technique you'll see in just a second. But I ended up going with the burlap by the yard because I wanted a tighter weave, and it takes a lot more time to do it like this. What I ended up doing, and you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but this has a really nice sheen to it. This side is flat. You can see it looks just like regular burlap, but this side has kind of an iridescent sheen to it, which I thought was really neat. Comes in all different kinds of colors. I also bought some that has a purple polka dot that I thought was really cute. But to do this, you have to get it down to a manageable width so you can cut. To do this particular wreath, we are going to be using 6 by 6 inch squares. And so what I had to do is I had to take that 1.5 yards of burlap that I bought, I cut it into 6-inch strips, and then I cut those into 6-inch squares. And that's another area where having a rotary cutter can really come in handy. And for a ruler, you'll find this in the quilting department, this clear ruler. And what I did is simply, now this has a frayed edge, it's got a sewn frayed edge. So I want to trim that off, and I'll just show you how it's very simply. I know you're smart enough to understand that I cut 6-inch squares, but I'm just going to show you that it really isn't difficult. It's a little bit tedious. And my cutting mat, which is another vital thing to have. If you don't have it, invest. I think $15 or $20 will get you a very decent cutting mat that's got a nice measuring grid on it. This one's 26. I've measured it from 26 inches over to 20. And I like this ruler because it's clear and I can see that my line is straight because it is clear, and that makes it so much easier to use. And to me, the rotary cutter is just a ton easier than a pair of scissors to get a straight line. Clearly I couldn't cut with my scissors along this. It would make it pretty difficult. I'm not 100% sure how many squares it's going to take. Like I said, I did 1.5 yards. Now, if you started out with the 5.5 inch roll of burlap, it would be much easier. What I would do if I were going to use this, I would just roll this out, and since it's 5.5 inches and I want squares, I would just cut them in every 5.5 inches, and boom, you've got all your squares, and it'd be much, much easier. And so the first time you do it, you may want to try it like that. It might be a little bit easier. This is really my last row that I'm going to do here, but I just wanted y'all to see. I've already pre-cut all the squares, so you don't have to kind of stick around for all of that cutting. But you can just see how easy it is with this ruler. And actually on the back of this ruler, I took the hot glue gun and I put 4 dabs of hot glue so it won't slide across my fabric, just to make it a little bit more secure. And let's see, I'll cut another one at 6 inches again, 6 inches. I've seen some people do these in 9-inch squares, which, you know, works, but I wouldn't do that on a 16-inch wreath. I would go ahead and wait to do a 9-inch square. If I had an 18 or 20-inch wreath, I would not do it on a 16-inch wreath. I just think your petals will be way too big, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. And I'll just cut one more. Where am I at? 20, so I did 14. Get to do a little bit of math. Remember your subtraction tables while you're doing this. Believe me, I have to stop and count sometimes, which is kind of sad, but it's true. I'm not necessarily a math genius, but anyway, so we're going to do that. And see, I didn't cut that all the way through. That's perfectly fine. Use your scissors. And I've got several stacks. Now, what I did was I took my wreath and I went ahead and I covered it in burlap. Now, again, much easier if you want to use a smaller roll of burlap to cover your wreath. I happen to have been out of burlap in this color in a smaller roll. I had an 18-inch wide roll of burlap, so I had to cut that down to be able to wrap around the wreath. But I just do this because you don't want any of that green foam to be showing. It's just not pretty through your wreath. So go ahead and first thing you need to do is cover it. And then if you're deciding after you're done to put embellishments and things like that, you want to be sure everything is really secure, and you can hot glue your burlap petals to burlap or any embellishments on the burlap much easier than you can on the foam wreath, because it'll melt. You don't want to melt it. So the first thing I'm going to do, oh, and the other thing that you're going to need for this, I'm using floral pins. Excuse me, yeah, floral pins is what these are. And they've got the little S on the end here. They've got 2 areas of contact, so it sticks really well. I did one also using T-pins, but I found it took a lot of them, and the T-pins are pretty expensive. You can get these floral pins for not very much, and I just emptied them out into a little container. I've got a couple of other containers over here that I'm using. You'll also want a bow. You can decide on whatever kind of bow that you want. Every wreath needs a bow, in my opinion, in some way, shape, or form. You just need to put a bow on your wreath. So that's the basic elements: your burlap, your wreath form, your floral pins. Those are the key points there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your square of burlap and turn it over to the side that you don't want shown. If you're using regular burlap, either side is going to be fine. What I do like about this particular burlap that I bought by the yard is that the ends are not all fraying. Now, if you want a rough edge, more rustic wreath, that is perfectly fine also. You could pull this loose to get that ruffled edge if you want to, but I happen to like it is. then you're going to just fold it in half to make a triangle. That's the first step. Then you're going to take one point of your triangle and you're going to fold it down to that point. Then you're going to take the other side and you're going to fold it down to a point. And this is what you're going to come out with. It's a petal. It looks like kind of like a little flower petal. You can, make this section as wide or as thin as you'd like. I just kind of like for it to be tight. So I've got it kind of pulled down to where it's tight there. And then you come over to your wreath. Now, as I've made these, I've started out on the center. I've tried that with each of them. And that's pretty good. I think this time, however, I'm going to start with the outside of the wreath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my floral pins and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of squeeze it together a little bit. And I'm going to stick it through. And you're going to want this to be at the very base of your petal because you don't want those pins to show. And that is a possibility that your pins will show. And then at the end, you'll find that you'll clean it up. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to choose a starting point. I'm going to look here and see. I know it's not the best angle for y'all, but I kind of have to see what I'm doing. And there it is. I'm going to take the next one. We're going to go all the way around the perimeter. And boy, this one is really not very square, so I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use the ones, and they're not, and it's okay if they're not totally square. Clearly this is not totally square. Everything that you cut are not going to be exactly right, but it's okay because once you get the petal made, it's going to be okay. And we'll just cross over that one, which is fine. Then your floral pin, again, punch it through. And I'm making sure that I'm getting all of the layers of the burlap. Then we're going to have to kind of decide. We're going to want this to get lined up pretty close. And I can see that I've made this one a little bit wider as I've gone. I still think that's going to be okay. You can see there. And we're going to keep on. We're going to keep going like that. Okay, as you can see now, I actually did the outside edge, and then I went ahead and came in and did the inside as well. The outside edge is probably going to take the most of all of the things that you're going to see and that you're going to need. And you're going to just make sure that all of your petals are going in the same direction. As you can see, and I started to think, well, what is the spacing in between them? And it really, from loop to loop, I don't know, about 1.5 inches is probably a kind of a good measure. I just eyeballed it actually. And then the inside, basically the same. It takes a lot fewer to do the inside. Be sure that your petals are going in the same direction on the inside as they did on the outside. And then we're ready to start working on the outside. And it's just going to take one on the outside. We're not going to have to go 2 side by side. And so we could take a couple minutes. I don't have to cut away to do this. Hopefully it won't take too long to show you all of these things. Again, I'm going ahead and I'm putting my pin in the petal before I stick it into the wreath. And like I said, I think you could probably do hot glue if you wanted to. But I don't know. That seems like it might be a little bit more difficult. And see here, I'm putting this petal on top of the 2 outer petals. I don't know if you can tell that. I think we have to get going around. See, I've got these 2 pretty close together. I didn't space those very well on the outside. Such as life, this happens. And I think that the more you do these, clearly the better that you're going to get at it as far as knowing what your spacing is and everything like that. Also, what we're going to do is we're going to come behind that one. It's a little bit easier, I think, to come behind. And we may need to do, as a matter of fact, I don't like that. I want those laying down. So they're going to come kind of under. We'll see how that goes. And I may end up doing some hot gluing to glue those tabs down to where it's a little bit more uniform. I'm going to keep going. I hear my Maximus Prime, my puppy dog, is under the table and he is enjoying something under there. I hate to think about what he's chewing on. So, oh, it's the leg of my table, so that's never a good thing. Now this does have a little tiny bit of fraying, and but not nearly as much as a looser weaved burlap would. So you can trim a little bit of that off. And really, you can see here how nicely this covers. If you see any of the burlap showing from the trim, or excuse me, where you've covered your wreath, just move some of your petals around. Fill those gaps where you can't see them. And here's where I've got my gap where I'm going to put my bow. And I've got a pretty nice sized bow. And when you get done, of course, as always, you're going to hang it up, you're going to look at it, you're going to look for those little areas, and you're going to fill those. And this basically is my bow right here. And to adhere the bow, let me get a look at this so I can see where we are. It's really pretty. And it's rustic, you know, it's not a perfect wreath, although I have seen some of these done so absolutely beautifully. You just cannot believe. There are people out there who just do the most wonderful work, and I always appreciate good work when I see it, and there is some out there that is absolutely beautiful. I think we determined that this was my weak area, so I'm going to put my bow. And this is a very simple, just nothing to it, burlap bow. I'm just wondering, I'm going to spread this out a little bit because I want to be able to stick my bow into the wreath itself. And I'm going to use some T-pins for this. I don't know if you remember what T-pins are. I know in the 60s and 70s when my mother wore wigs, she would pin the wigs to the styrofoam heads with T-pins. That's what these are. And I actually got these at the beauty supply. So maybe somebody is still pinning wigs to styrofoam heads with T-pins. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick this through the back of the loop of this center loop of this bow. And I'm going to stick that. And really, to make it super secure, I could have taken some hot glue, covered those pins in hot glue before I stuck them into the styrofoam, and it would have kind of seared it to that. Now if I wanted to do some other embellishments with this, there's nothing that says that you can't do that. If you wanted to add, you know, a little plaque, or if you want your bow to be kind of on the side like that, and add a plaque here. My first thought was maybe to use this cross instead of a bow, but I'm afraid, you know what though, I thought the cross was going to be too big, but once this gets filled up with everything, if that bow wasn't there, that cross might look really pretty, as a matter of fact, against that. Let's pull that bow off. Oh my gosh, look at that. That is actually sort of pretty. Now, of course, the issue comes to attaching it. We run into the same kind of problems that we run into when we're attaching things to the deco mesh wreaths. What is the best way to get something attached? And with this foam wreath, the question would remain the same. Let's think just for a second. I tell you what, I'm going to work on getting this attached, and once I get that done, because I'm going to have to think about it, and then I'll explain it to you when we come back, because I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do that right at the moment. So let me get it attached, and I'll be back in just a second, and I will show you how we did it, and we'll see the finished product. Thanks! Okay, I think we've gotten just about done. I went ahead and put the cross on the wreath. I used a zip tie. As you can see here, I had to use two of them. I connected two zip ties together, wrapped it around, tucked it underneath the little petals, and I added some other things. I want the Mean Man to scan around this area. I want you to see, and you can also see that it's now dark outside. We started, it was full sunshine. I tried different ribbons, I tried different embellishments. I didn't like any of them for the most part, how they looked. I did decide to go with this rope. I think this is jute that I went with because it had kind of a rustic, almost western look with this cross. Then the Mean Man suggested that I add some other colors, that it asked if I had any turquoise, and I did happen to have a couple of hydrangeas. You can see I've got a bucket here that is just kind of my flower pile. I've got a couple of these buckets with a couple of varieties of flowers, and I've got a ton more that are ordered, as a matter of fact. So I pulled some out of there. I added them in here. I've only pinned them in because I'm not 100% sure that I want to keep them here. So I didn't want to glue it because the petals of the wreath are really, really important the way they look. So I didn't want to put glue on them and then have a possibility of taking something away. This is seriously, it did take me a long time to do, but it's not because the wreath was difficult to do. It's because my thought process, trying things and retrying things, that's what takes the most time for me. It takes me forever to make a decision on what I want to go with. And I'll change it a dozen times. But I think that you'll agree that this wreath technique, this petal technique, is absolutely beautiful. And it can make a lovely wreath. So I hope that you try to make this wreath. You can do this. It is not difficult. Don't be scared to try it because you can do it. I'm getting stuff all the time, like I mentioned before, comments and things on my Facebook. Thank you for encouraging me to try this. I did it, and people are making some beautiful things. So I encourage you to try this, and be sure and check out the website under atexassky.com. And then you'll find lots of tutorials, lots of renovation and redos there, some different ideas. I just really do encourage you to go there, try this, and have a wonderful time doing it. If you have any questions, you can ask them. Subscribe to my channel. Ask questions. I answer every single question that I get, and I try to be really, really helpful. That's on my YouTube channel. And so just give it a try. Thanks so much.